I'm Chris Mills with surfstrengthcoach.com. Today, the pelvis, whether you need to stretch your quads or stretch your hamstrings. This really ties in with a video and post that I've done. You can find it on YouTube and the website, surfstrengthcoach.com, about stretching your hips, keeping your hips mobile. And so a lot of times people are saying, oh, my hamstrings or my hip flexors, and you need to figure out what it is you need to lengthen. You need to get all the hips loosened up and warmed up. But it becomes important for those of you with back pain or back problems to really figure out if you need to stretch the front of the hip or the hamstrings, basically. So, two positions of the pelvis. You need to figure out what you are so you can figure out what you need to stretch. There's an anterior tilt. It's where you're kind of sticking your ass out, kind of an exaggerated curve right here. That's an anterior tilt. That's this pelvis rolling forward. Or you can go posterior tilt. So you kind of butt tuck, you've got less curve here in the spine, so the pelvis would be more of this position rather than that position. This position, your pelvis is being pulled down by various muscles, but it could definitely be the hamstrings, so you would need to lengthen the hamstrings if possible. Some good supine hamstring stretches. If you're in this position, it means you're too tight on the front of the hip, so your psoas, your iliacus, your rectus femoris. So I see a lot with people and clients that I consult with, they're stretching the hell out of their hamstrings and potentially making things worse. So get figured out if you need to spend more time lengthening the front of the hips with some rectus femoris quad stretches. I've got posts on it. Or if you need to lengthen the hamstrings. So let me give you a few tests that you can do to kind of figure out what your pelvis is doing. Then you can spend a little more of a specific time lengthening tissue that actually needs to get lengthened rather than just doing some shit stretches that aren't really benefiting you. So, a couple tests. So the easiest way to get figured out if you're anterior tilt, sticking the ass out, or posterior tilt is just a wall test. You're going to kind of look at the amount of curve in your lumbar spine. What's happening at the pelvis will affect the lumbar spine. If you're anterior tilted, you have more extension or lordosis in the spine right here. If you're posterior tilted, you've got basically what some would refer to as a flat back, so you don't have as much curve through here. Both of those things can lead to back problems. So again, you need to figure out if you're anterior tilted, which means you're too tight up at the front of the hip. So being too tight up front is going to pull the pelvis forward, and that's going to stretch out the hamstrings. They're elongated, so they might feel tight, but they're not tight and restricted and shortened. They're stretched to all hell and long. So if you stretch those hamstrings even further, it's going to create more instability in the pelvis, more possibility of back pain. You need to stretch the front of the hips. So what are we doing? Measuring with your hand, just your lumbar spine. So if you can easily slide your entire hand, so I'm going to exaggerate, I'm easily sliding my whole arm, that means you're anteriorly tilted. You need to stretch the front. And again, you'll feel tight in your hamstrings, but you're not shortened. They don't need to be lengthened. You need to lengthen the front. If you can't get your hand through the spine or through this lumbar spine, it means you're posteriorly tilted, meaning you need to stretch. You need to actually elongate the hamstrings with some good quality hamstring stretches. You do some waiter's bow. You get real tight and then just teapot forward. So I'm not losing this posture. I'm just stretching the hamstrings. It's a good hamstring stretch. There's some other ones out there. So hopefully that gives you some insight into whether you need to stretch the front of the hip or the back of the hip. Either way, you need to keep your hips mobile. Surfing, really dynamic hip positions, lunging, legs are all over the place, hips are moving. If you don't have proper mobility in the hip, you're going to sacrifice movement in the lumbar spine. A lot of room for injury. So anterior tilt, stretching the front. Posterior tilt, you're actually going to need to stretch the hamstrings. So that gives you more insight into how to do a specific warm up or stretch for your own personal things going on. If you can, find a Czech practitioner or a physio or a chiropractor, and they can accurately measure your pelvis and get figured out what it is you need to stretch spot on correctly. It's really relevant for you guys out there in back pain. Depending on the hip, if you stretch the wrong muscles, you could make things worse. Or depending on the pelvis, stretching the wrong muscles will make things worse. That's it. surf your ass off. If you got any questions about this or anything else, leave me questions on the blog or on Facebook, or just shoot me an email, surfstrengthcoach@gmail.com. That's it. Surf.